live for our next session. Welcome everyone who's joining us. I'm really pleased to present a great panel discussing developments in the region of the Baltics and nearby countries. And first, I'm going to give it over to Kimmo to give an overview of the KPIs in the region and what's kind of been going on and what do the numbers tell us. And then Kimmo's going to moderate what I would presume will be a great discussion around all the different developments. So Kimmo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Hilary. So good morning, everyone who is joining this session. If you haven't been before in the conference, today we will be looking into the development opportunities in the region and talking about sort of what's going on in general and in the market. And I would like to also start by introducing the panelists that we will be discussing with shortly. So if we start with Adam and then David and then Frank, can you all please introduce yourself briefly?
Hello, I'm Adam Konieczny. I'm Head of Development for Europe at the Louvre Hotels Group.
Good morning. My name is Frank Reul. I'm in charge of development for Accor in Eastern Europe.
Hello, I'm in charge of development for Radisson Hotel Group for Eastern Europe, including the Baltics.
All right, so we will have interesting topics to cover with these fine and able gentlemen in a couple of minutes' time. But before that, I just wanted to briefly share with you a little bit sort of the background, sort of what is happening or has happened in the area and how things are going to look potentially going forward. So for those some of you, we're just going to have a quick sort of a brief overview of the region, but a couple of words about Christian Co very briefly. The reason why we're involved is we are one of the largest hotel consulting companies in Europe, covering most of the region and area of the Baltics as well. And we mainly concentrate on sort of the services of consultancy and brokerage, and within those various sub-segments, as you can see from the screen. So if you have any operational issues, we are glad to assist you. And more so in line with today's topic, if you happen to be considering developing hotels, we very much can advise you in many ways of analyzing the markets, funding operating companies and investments and investors and so forth. But all that can be sort of discussed a bit later. And as the topic is quite large, we very much would like to encourage you to get in touch with us afterwards. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to come back to us during the breaks or so. But very much would like to hear from each one if you have any concerns. So straightforward, then moving to today's topic and talk about sort of the current market performance. Here you can see sort of how the RevPAR has changed over the course of the some past months. And we saw that everything was going very, very well during last summer. And then we saw some typical decline in the subsequent months. And then we were heading for the typical slow period of January and February time. And then boom, Corona hit us very severely in the March time, and the full impact that was then felt during April and May, when the RevPARs literally narrowed down to almost zero. Thereafter, we've seen some recovery when the summer months were present. We saw the typical leisure market to pick up in the months of June and July, and assisting in some occupancy recovery there. Then the statistics here ends in August, where we start to see already the plateau of the market and the sort of the change over from leisure markets to hopefully corporate market, which is absent at the moment due to the travel restrictions and people sort of trying to avoid traveling. And then if we compare then this to the previous year's performance over the period of year to date, August and sort of August month, you can see how drastic the situation has been and the impact of the situation. So market by market, you can see that we are down good 70% or thereabouts in comparison to the previous year. And we obviously now very keen to see how the situation continues. The acid test is out there as we speak, when we are just waiting for the final statistics of September to arrive to see how the impact is going to continue. Does it show any kind of sort of signs of getting leveled or improving, or is it going to continue to become a whole lot worse? Then if we look at though sort of the benefits of the Baltic states in the composition of the market, here is a brief overview of the market itself in where is the demand really coming from in terms of the overnights. And we can see that vast majority of these three markets, capital markets, overnights are actually being produced by the nearby European markets, that being Poland, Germany, and the likes. And then there's always reasonably limited amount of demand coming from the domestic sources or inter-Baltic sources, sort of hovering around 20–25% of the total market. But luckily, these markets rely only a fraction, around 10% of the long-haul market that constitutes like the Asian market and the American market, that has a longer distance to travel to cover these markets. And as we see and forecast, we think that during the remaining part of the year and early part of next year, the domestic market is going to be recovering within the first segments. And we are expecting to see increase there in the travel within the countries. Furthermore, we expect a similar phenomenon to take place within the Baltic states, inter-traveling this region, and maybe the European demand to hover on sort of on par to the previous months and years, and no drastic increase there, but potentially no drastic decrease neither. But what we are expecting though is a decline in the long-haul demand before this pandemic will be resolved and cleared for good. Then we are expecting the long-haul market to start to recover. But we don't foresee that to take place during the remaining part of this year, nor during the early part of next year. And then if we then briefly look at this type of graph, where we present what proportion or the share of the market is domestic overnights and what proportion is sort of European overnights. And we can see that the cities which rely on high level of domestic demand and less on the European or long-haul overnights are expected to potentially recover faster than some of the other markets in relative terms. And we can see that that type of cities are highly likely going to be Berlin, Helsinki, and Copenhagen, whereas we think that the ones that will struggle tremendously could be cities like Barcelona, London, Paris, and potentially Zurich, where there's a high dependency on foreign demand or long-haul demand. And if we look at then where Vilnius, Riga, and Tallinn stand in this chart here, that indicates that there's a relatively low proportion of domestic demand, but equally so, not very high proportion of the European overnights neither. So this is a little bit a question mark, how we're going to see this to improve. Are we going to be moving left or are we going to be moving up? But the hope is that now, during the some restrictions of travel, we could expect to see the domestic share overnights to increase, and thus these dots to move to our left. And then if we also then further think about sort of the overall picture and situation here, is that I think there is three key takeaways to be taken with this one. I think that one of the areas is the restrictions. If we are expected to recover, we have to be able to receive the demand visiting these countries. So at the moment, the situation obviously has got a whole lot more dire than it was, but we would expect that maybe to correct itself in the next coming months when the borders were still open for travel, and the Baltic states were one of the few sort of travel bubbles in Europe where traveling was allowed without no restrictions from one country to another. Also, if we think about that, part of the demand is using different transportation modes, but like traveling, but the European demand is expected to fly in. So there are financial rescue packages in place for the most of the airlines covering the key source markets. So from that point of view, the situation in the Baltics looks relatively good. Further, if we think about then economy, the local economies were in relatively good shape in terms of GDP growth, unemployment, debt levels, and so. And so if we compare these to some other countries which already struggled with the sort of economic growth prior the pandemic and the corona, they are going to be really feeling the situation. Furthermore, unemployment was well constrained and under control in these countries, so that is also helping them tremendously to deal with the situation. And then finally, if you look at the debt levels, the proportion of the debt to the GDP levels were relatively modest, some hovering around 10% and a couple others below 40%. But if you compare that in other Southern European countries, where the ratios were already prior the pandemic closer to 100%, and now they have taken tremendous amounts of loans to recover from the situation. So the situation is very dire there. And finally, sentiment. One of the very important things affecting these type of phenomenon like recession. We have had far less restrictions than in most of the European markets. There hasn't been proper lockdowns and things like this that many other countries have really suffered from and experienced it, downturning the sentiment and the mood tremendously. And also the infection rates are relatively low. Resources have not been stretched to the limit in hospitals. So there is still scope for safety, as mortality rates are also either decreasing or staying relatively flat in comparison to increase in the cases. And then finally, social distancing, use of digital applications and others is already something very common for this region. So all that will keep assisting people to feel a bit safe, you know, and avoid the sort of crowded places and continue with their lives. So I hope that with these three takeaways, the region is relatively positioned far better than many others to deal with the situation. Now let's move on and to some more positive topic, and let's talk about developments. And here we have devised this session sort of into 5 different key subcategories that you can see on the screen there. And I think we're going to be starting sort of with some of the development landscape topics, but there will be many people who have a lot of questions which we don't have time to cover in this space, or nor the time allowed for us this time. So please do use the facilities available to ask questions and send questions, or contact any of the panelists afterwards during the breaks or during the coming days with your questions. We're more than happy to address any issues that you may have. Fine, I'm going to be now moving this slide away so that people can see you guys talking and sort of discussing these topics. We'll stop sharing here and move on then to the topics itself. So if we were to start potentially with the development landscape, the question that people still ask is that, you know, most of the operating companies are now struggling and, you know, putting the focus on just surviving, you know, the current issues. So many keep asking from me that is there still interest to grow currently, or are you just trying to maintain the status quo? Who would like to open on this one? Maybe we'll ask from David. You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, hi, hello everybody. I think you have to look at the business in 2 different ways. We have the operating business and we have our development Okay, obviously, it's no secret that hotels globally are struggling, as is the general hospitality business, leisure, entertainment. So that of course creates a cash flow concern for everybody. But then it puts more emphasis on trying to grow the business, you know, and we see lots of opportunities. I'm sure my colleagues and other operators see the opportunities as well. We don't stop signing, we don't stop developing through a crisis. That's the time to grow, it's the time to expand. We're launching a new brand this week, which will be a conversion brand, an affiliation brand. We are looking at ways to take over hotels that might be in trouble. We're looking at ways to expand into geographies where we're not. And we've been very successful as a group across EMEA and globally in using the opportunity of a crisis to promote the benefit of being with a brand. These are the times when independent hotels, independent chains reach out to the brands to help reach a broader audience, a broader loyalty program. So I think, yes, operationally it's challenging, but not fatal. And from development, it's the time to move forward and to be strong in a crisis.
Yeah, seeing it beyond the issue. Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're building the pipeline for the future. Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. And what about you, Frank? What's the situation at the moment? Is it cocooning, or going for the war with the victory?
You know, there's a number of things. It's clear as long as the hygiene crisis doesn't gets under control, our industry will suffer. We should not do, and it will take a while for the industry to come back. This is very simple. The long-term prospects of the industry, in my view, are very prosperous. You can feel that once people will gain back confidence to travel, there will be an explosion of people wanting to meet, to party, to see things. People are getting really annoyed to not be able to participate in the product offering which we give. We, Jaco, in Europe, I can report that we are exceptionally busy. Last year, 2019, was our record year in terms of signings, and I think we will be very close, or we will be very close in 2020. Even the business model has changed. What we're doing is a lot of long-term developments, because there's still finance available for long-term developments, and that also gives investors are really confident in the long-term, in the longer, middle, and long-term future of this industry. And secondly, we're signing lots and lots of conversion. We have 7, 8, 9, 10 conversion brands, and both individual hotels and small networks are really teaming up. I think there's a lot of operators and individual owners are really thinking from when the business comes back, how do I position myself to be in the front line to benefit of the recovery. And for us, it's tremendous. We both in small networks and individual independent hotels, I think we'll do our best year ever. And I think from the middle of next year, when hopefully our industry will be able to pick up, a lot of hotels will be in prime position to benefit of this recovery that way.
Good. So it looks reasonably positive. Adam, do you see the same way, that this is just an ugly bump in the road, but the road is clear after that?
Well, we, of course, as my colleagues said, we had to change a little bit the development strategy and focus more on conversion. So to rebrand existing hotels. So I think for the coming months, what is important is flexibility, because we know that a lot of owners of existing hotels, they are also struggling financially. So they will not have probably big budgets for conversion, for rebranding. So I think, as I said, the flexibility is quite important. And after that, I hopefully think that from spring next year, banks will be more open also to finance, at least to take a look at new projects, as new developments.
Okay. Well, we'll cover the investors' views and banks lending topics shortly. What about then? Is there a sort of a phenomenon going on in the field of the battle as well? That are we expecting more mergers and acquisitions? Are the big companies eating the smalls, or what's going on the turf? maybe Frank, you can just, you know, shed some light on this one briefly.
You know, it's always difficult to shed light on mergers and acquisitions before there is a merger and acquisition, because one shouldn't do. But it's clear that there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of, and there will be, but I don't see a massive merger of acquisitions. I see more small and middle-sized companies teaming and looking for scale, because scale is today important, but in 12 months and 18 and 24 months, it will be even more important. So I expect in this incredible unconsolidated European market, there will be consolidation, but I really see it for my region. In every country, you have a number of operators with 10, 20 properties who are really wanting to stay independent, but at the same time also want to link with a powerful network, with a loyalty scheme, with and I think what is also and this is very interesting actually, I see a lot of investors. Maybe one point what I forget in the first answer is that we picked up a lot of lost leases. So basically you have a lot in several countries, we had a lot of hotels under lease agreements with local tenants who clearly cannot commit to what they signed up to. So we signed quite a few lost leases into management agreements. That's also something we've been busy with. But I would expect really I think the values of the very large companies are such that if one big beast will take over another big beast, I think this is pure speculation.
Sure. Anything to add to that, David? Is big tsunami coming, or is it over?
No, I think concur with what Frank said. Nothing really to add. I mean, we can't comment on the big macro mergers acquisitions. That's beyond us. But in terms of regional chains, smaller groups, certainly joining the chain, as we've all discussed, that those conversion opportunities to get scale are clearly identifiable.
Sure. Adam, any current sort of, you know, observations on what's happening? You know, is it just big eating small, or what's happening?
I think there will be a kind of integration process. We at the moment we are finalizing one, but this is a small merger. Some hotels across Europe will join our network still this year. But as Frank said, what we see at the moment, especially in countries like Germany, Austria, which we had a lot of leases, there is a lot of opportunities now to take over the existing leases, and this is an opportunity for all the groups, for all strong groups, because there was a lot of small groups which were not able to pay the rent. So
sure.
Opportunity for big groups now.
Okay, well that is sort
a
of
big group can't pay the rent as well.
Yeah. Well, that is sort of then a bridge to my next question, is that from your point of view, I mean, we will discuss this soon from the banks and investors' point of view, but appetite for lease or management agreement is also now a lot in the balance, because we can see some of the companies struggling with leases, but there would be more cash in the company if we were also applying management contracts. So what's the view from the operators at the moment? Which one is that you would like to prefer going forward in the near future? Does anyone want to take a lead?
I mean, we've always tried to have a healthy balance between lease, management and franchise. I think as a company, you go through waves of leasing a little bit more, and then you have a crisis, then you pull back, then you reconsider, then you go a bit more management and franchise, then things get better. Bit more lease, key cities, development strategies. Development strategies are never one direction forever. You're moving, you're trying to anticipate how the market will go. And of course now, we may have been a bit more bullish on lease a few years ago, but now of course, looking at COVID, revisiting your lease agreements, revisiting force majeure in your management agreements that have guarantees perhaps, you need to work through the times and to really work with the times, and your strategy is not stuck in one place. So, I mean, I don't think we change dramatically our view on the three business models. You just have to, you get the mix at different times. Today, possibly be more keen to look at franchise.
Sure.
For volume,
Very brief comment to that, Frank.
Maybe very brief comment is first of all that we don't do leases. We don't have any leased hotels. And secondly, for the first time, I see a lot of investors coming to me from Frank, you know, before the crisis, we should have a management contract. We would have made much more money. And in the end, the risk is the same. If there is no business, then we don't make money. And if you're under a management agreement, your upside is plus 20% versus a lease agreement when the business is okay. So I see actually people which I couldn't speak to about management agreement before the crisis who are really telling me, if the business comes back, I want to take the full upside of the hotel potential.
Yeah, they finally become a capitalist.
Yes.
Right.
I think that this crisis also showed that the lease model is probably not the best one, as many hotels on a lease agreement, just the tenants step down from the lease, and the owners are in much bigger problems than having management contract, because management contract is always kind of a dialogue between the owner and the operator. That's why I see in the future more and more management contracts, maybe with some kind of thresholds, maybe some GOP guarantees or other kind of cure mechanism. But I think would be more management contract than leases, especially on the markets which this is possible to finance, because in Germany and Austria it might be a challenge, but I think in Baltic countries, I think management contract will increase.
I mean, yeah, we've been seeing so much demand for lease in the Baltics. I've been getting from consultants constantly lease deal here, lease deal there, lease deal in Hungary, lease deal in Romania. I don't touch it. I don't touch it. I'm not going to lease in those areas. And you know, it's been kind of, I don't know if it's the banks leading that or developers or some of the operators that do lease, but it's been a strange that I've not quite understood the last 2 years. And Kimmo, we've discussed this, why so many lease deals have been coming to the market, and maybe it's 1 or 2 companies that are doing it, but we certainly wouldn't touch those markets at all for lease.
Yeah, let's touch that a little bit when we talk about investor views and banks lending criteria changes and all that. Let's take one more question on the development landscape. What's your experience at the moment when you've been dealing with the developers and part of them, you know, developing yourselves as well? Is there an increase in development costs at the moment, or is there a great opportunity now to strike deals and the price is going down? What's the story on the field at the moment?
I see on many markets that the construction cost went down a little bit. On some markets, even up to 15%. So potentially, if someone has an equity or has a finance security, it's a good time to build, because you can do it cheaper. A lot of construction companies looking for job now. Mm-hmm. The same with the fit-out companies. So this looks quite positive. But of course, if you have equity to do it.
Sure.
I think the picture is a little bit mixed. I think the residential development is in most markets still pretty strong, which is a good scope. And I think a lot of office projects are coming to the end of their development period. And once this is done, I think there will be really opportunities to get more competitive construction, because I see office developers really careful by taking on new projects after the ones they have under development. So I would expect another 6 to 9 months, and development costs might, for the first time, come down as well.
Yeah. Okay. So that's very good. Very good. Let's move on to talk about some of the supply.
He's on mute.
Kimmo, you're on mute, huh?
Yeah. There's a dog on the.
There's a dog in your office, is there? Who let the dogs out, Kimmo?
You should feed the dog, you know.
Yes. It's those wild Finnish wolves coming to get them. Okay.
Kimmo, you're on mute.
You're still on mute. You're still on mute. Come on.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the supply balance and the sort of new trends and concepts that's coming into the market. So, is this potentially the good sort of catalyst for further development of limited services, as many have indicated that, you know, the price elasticity of such a product is such that it is doing quite well at good times, but is also surviving on the bad times. Any comments on that?
I would say that we've been working a lot ourselves on service apartments. We've not been known for that in the past, but we've been really developing that part of our business. And we have one in Riga, the park in Verona, and that's been just such a success through the crisis. And we've had in other countries and cities the same type of feedback from our service apartment business. And I'm sure Frank has many more than we have, but certainly we're seeing that that's a very stable model and something that we're putting a lot more effort into. And sometimes you have to live through a crisis and see it and feel it to be able to actually develop from it. So we all learn something.
Sure.
Yeah.
Adam, any comments on that?
Yes, I think one point is that we see that across Europe, let's say 3-star hotels like we have our brand Campanile showed over the last months the best recovery compared to 4- and 5-star hotels. So that's point one. And point two is I agree with what David said, that there is a big demand from new investors to develop some long stay concept. So we also we prepared a new brand, Tulip Residences, which is a long stay product. And the third thing I see on the market, that there are investors who are looking into a standardized hostel product, because a lot of investors strongly believe that the backpackers and young people will be the first group who will start traveling after the restrictions finish. So I think this will be another trend that will come at least next year.
Okay, well, thank you. We have a lot of limited service hotels, so let's hear it from you.
I would like to add two things. First, I agree with Adam that everything which is budget, economy, mid-scale hotels, the recovery is much quicker. I think luxury hotels are suffering more. What we've been very successful with is the hybrid model. It's basically the mix of a hotel and extended stay, tribe living, Novotel with a Novotel living element. It's very successful. And then I think we have a great opportunity to completely rework everything which is common areas, and to really make sure that the common areas are built as an area, as a community which is used by locals for working, for commuting, for meeting, safe meetings. And there we've been very successful very quickly. I was in a hotel yesterday which completely reworked the lobby in 2 or 3 months' time, and people can go there to work and so. And I think there's another great opportunity because we have a lot of square meters in prime locations, and we have to take benefit of that as of now, and also we have to incorporate that in our future products.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we've been looking at sort of the cities where, because people's travel patterns will change. Yes, there are cities that offer an opportunity to tap on 1 or 2 days of leisure will become much more, I think, more successful. So the Riga, Tallinn, Vilnius have good opportunities going forward to take the corporate demand that will be less, it will be slower. For safety reasons, people don't want to travel, or corporate budgets. But people, when they do travel, may take a weekend. To tap on a weekend in cities that offer such great opportunities as the Baltics capitals, and looking at building in leisure components to your typical business hotels.
Right.
And increasing, adding meeting facilities into the rooms, online meeting facilities. So there's a lot of development we're all doing now, I think, with our products. As Frank says, with some prime real estate, prime spaces to really develop going forward.
And in terms of supply, do you consider that there is any segment that is already sort of fairly saturated, that there is no new supply needed at the moment, that we're happy with what we have? Or is it still that all 4 or 5 major segments still require a large sort of increase in terms of supply?
You're talking about the Baltics specifically, or in general?
Let's talk about Baltics now specifically first.
I mean, there's probably scope for 3-star development in the Baltics, I would say. There hasn't been traditionally. We don't really have the brand, though, yet to do that. But I think Frank and Adam can probably comment more on that.
For the Baltics, I think what we are really looking to niches, to be honest. We're looking to bring a mid-scale lifestyle, maybe some premium lifestyle, branded extended stay. We're definitely looking at the Baltics, maybe some luxury boutique I would say we are really looking. There's a lot of, if you look at the new supply in the Baltics, it's all mostly traditional 3- and 4-star hotels. So whatever we try to bring now with the investors, we really try to bring something very carefully, which is not present today, and I think that's very important for the Baltics.
Right.
Yes.
We agree.
Yeah, similar with us. So like 2- 3-star brands like Campanile Premier Class, plus the hostel brand, which is something new. We created just very recently, Hostel by Premier Class. So this is another brand we would like to introduce, and the long stay.
Yeah. So it sort of looks like that the winners at the moment are the limited service, the long stay market, and then also the coming of co-working function as well as then the leisure element, extending the stay to number of days. Let's quickly touch base on, as we have sort of a few minutes left of the time, a little bit about the investor side of things and banks and lending. Have you seen any major changes yet in the lending criteria? For example, you have to be working very closely with the developers or the investors, and they are borrowing money. So what's your exposure at the moment? Have you seen the loan to value ratios to drop down, and has there been an increase in the interest rates, or in general just reluctance of the banking sector to look after the hospitality sector at the moment? Who wants to take a lead? Maybe Frank, you can okay. Open up on this one.
I can tell you the cost of lending, short-term lending, has gone off massively. That's for sure. On top of that, if you look at the Baltics, I would like to find the bank. That's something else. If I look the wider picture, there's definitely still development financing available, and we also, in several countries, we're still succeeding with the banks to get reasonable good term for longer term developments. For the shorter term, equity is for sure king. We, in several countries such as Poland, Montenegro, Serbia, we'll do the first one in Romania. We signed a number of condo models. Even we are very, very careful. Because there's a lot of individual people sitting with cash on the saving account, bringing nothing. But we are very careful. No guaranteed returns. No, but this works very well. But only we are going softly to make sure that there is no fixed commitment. This is really this is criteria for us. And then there is some really big funds who know this market will come back. And for instance, we signed one with the big mezzanine fund of UK mezzanine fund, who is giving quite a bit of money for the development phase.
Sure.
Solutions can be found, but I think the traditional bank, especially in the Baltics, because we've been looking at financing something in the Baltic recently, it's difficult.
Right, let's get a different question for David. Have you seen that there is a favoring of the existing up and running hotel financing, or are banks shying away of new developments?
I mean, look, I think a lot of it's going to come down to the relationship the developer or the investor has with the bank themselves, We are fortunate enough to have a couple of large portfolio investors in the Baltics, so that their arrangement with their banks are different, very much different to the guy who's building his first hotel and has a retail business and is trying to navigate the way through. So, and the banks in the Baltics have had a turbulent few years, let's say, well documented. And it's not been an easy market for people to raise finance for projects that they have no experience of doing. So, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think the banks will stand by their business partners, as they should do, and I know they are in our case. But for the new developments, there may be some troubles ahead.
Yeah, but that may be also partially due to the size and the sort of the volume and the branding that helps you guys there.
It can depend also on the standing of that particular investor, but with that comes opportunities. I think next year, March, April, we may start seeing some defaults on some projects or some existing hotels. There's a lot of equity sitting out there. As Frank half mentioned, you know, a lot of funds are waiting. It's not the time. But you know, March, April next year, we could see a bit of activity, and that's when we all pounce, of course.
Sure. Well, let's then move on and ask a little bit from Adam. What's your sort of experience so far? Does a branding play a major role when you go and see the banks for some, you know, good debt money? So what's your experience and feeling so far? Major changing, major impact, or they don't really care?
No, I think the branding is getting even more important now. A lot of what we see also that a lot of hotel owners who didn't want to have a brand, now they want to talk with us because they think it will be easier to refinance the property or finance the property with the brand. And of course, being part of the hotel groups will give you access to much better distribution and cheaper distribution, which is, I think, key for the future, especially when we see the future when the borders will be open again and people will travel again from international. Then I think the first selection will be more branded hotels because people will be also looking for safety, and being part of a global group. It means some level of standard of safety in the hotels, some standards.
Very important point.
Yeah, and then as a final point, sort of our continuing discussions, either within the Baltics or in the neighboring countries, what would be your any favorite hotspots for development within the next, sort of say, 18 to 24 months?
I mean, for me, it's the places where we don't really have a strong representation. You know, hotspots, of course, are all the usual big cities and what have you. But for me, we want to get in Montenegro. We want to develop in through Croatia. We want to be stronger in regional Romania. Few more hotels in Budapest, definitely. And to look at, what did I forget? Yeah, it's pretty much it. Bulgaria.
What about you, Frank? Would it be time to penetrate Scandinavia, maybe?
Yes, but that will happen. Don't worry.
Good.
Eventually, this will happen. Apart from that, I concur a little bit with David. I think a country which we should also put on our watch list is Albania. It will develop, and very good strategy, nice projects on the horizon. And I think this is one which in the next few years we will also see some beautiful new projects coming up.
Sure. And finally, Adam, what's going on with Tulip and so forth? What are the hotspots for you to try to find more foothold?
I mean, definitely for us, it's a lot to do in the Baltics because currently we don't have presence in the Baltic countries. But we're looking wider at Europe. I agree that Albania is an interesting market to develop for the future. And I also think that next year there will be quite a lot of opportunities in Budapest based on existing hotels which are struggling.
Hopefully not least. Yes.
Budapest and Prague.
Yeah, that's pretty much all we have time for. But as everyone who are listening can understand, the topic is quite massive, and there will be enough questions to cover for the next few days. So please use your opportunity to ask questions either through the facilities that the conference is providing or getting directly in touch with any of the panelists or myself going forward. But I thank you very much. This is very encouraging that the operators see the world more positively than some of the other people, that this is not the end of the road. This is continuity. This is just hopefully a bump on the road, and in half a year's time, maybe just a bad dream. So that's all for me and the panelists. Thank you very much for watching and following.
Thank you so much, Kimmo. And thank you to Adam, David, and Frank as well for joining us. I think it was a great discussion. This will be all available on rewatch for the next week on the same platform. So anyone who didn't catch it can go back. And I'm really hoping that, like Kimmo said, in 6 months' time, we can actually all be in a place together when we do the forum in the spring, and can have the interaction that we all actually really craving. So thanks so much again, everyone who's listening. Make sure you go to the Christie & Co. Partner page as well on the platform. There's a lot of reports there, and we make sure that the numbers Kimmo presented will be shared as well. Thank you, everyone. We'll take now a 15-minute break, and the next session will start on the hour, and it will be about robot morality. So do join us for that. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks all.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start.